Hello and welcome. I'm Silvia Pavoni, Economics Editor of The Banker, and I'm in Berlin for the SME Finance Forum organized by the IFC, the World Bank's private sector arm. I'm now joined by Roger Havenith, the Deputy Chief Executive of the European Investment Fund, and Adel Meer, the newly appointed head of the IFC's SME Finance Unit. Thank you both for joining me. You're also going to join me later on today on stage, and we're going to talk about the future, the vision for filling the SME finance gap and how your organizations can help in this endeavor. Roger, what are your views?
Well, first of all, I would say that SMEs are really important in Europe. It was said in the introduction this morning. I mean, they represent 99% of all the companies in Europe. They create also the majority of all the jobs. In the last 5 years, 85% in Europe. They represent the backbone of the economy. And I'm glad to see throughout the surveys now that are being carried out by the European Union, but also by the ECB, that the situation for SMEs in Europe is improving. And that access of finance, which used to be one of the major constraints, is no longer in the top 3, but still important. In particular, what we see is that there are big disparities between the countries. In some countries, really still a very, very important issue, like Greece, but also in the southern European countries.
So your role is to even out, perhaps, these disparities as well?
Indeed. We have a role to play in trying to help really SMEs to get access to finance. And we do it only in areas where there are market failures. In certain areas, the system works well, but what we see is certainly in areas like startup finance or innovation finance, the bankers are more risk averse. There's plenty of finance funding available, but the risk taking is still not there. So that's where we come in.
That's where you come in. And so you said that SME finance has gone down, or financial issues have gone down in the list of concerns for SMEs. That's not the case in emerging markets, is it?
No, not yet. And I think they're in the process of getting there. But I think in the emerging market space where IFC is active, we're seeing that access to finance is still the major obstacle for SMEs. Obviously, it depends on the markets. You know, there are large markets like China where banks are getting slowly more comfortable in this space and fintechs are getting more active. But in less sophisticated markets like Cambodia or many African markets, that's still the major hurdle. I think the formalization process hasn't occurred in emerging markets as it has in Europe. And as SMEs get more sophisticated, as their financial statements and their corporate governance structures become more formalized, I think then lenders start getting more comfortable with that risk. But until that happens, you know, IFC still plays a role in trying to get that credit enhancement mechanism so that SMEs that are currently underserved are able to get access to the capital they need.
And so we're talking the overarching theme of the event is digitalization, of course. So how does this play into what you can offer to this market?
Digitalization is one of the main themes, but not the only one. I think also circular economy and a few others are quite prominent, or fintechs, which are on the agenda. But in the area of digitalization is certainly one of the areas where we offer support to a number of financial instruments. And basically what we do is twofold. Through the area of equity, we have a model where we invest in funds, which themselves target, amongst others, also digitalization. And these are really for the most innovative companies seeking equity. Typically, these companies do not yet have reached the break-even point or not yet the profit, so they're in the early stage. And then in the area of debt finance, we provide risk sharing and guarantees, credit enhancement as you referred to before. And this is for a wider field of SMEs who want really to use to the full digitalization to change their business model, the way they operate, or to expand their business.
And a great deal of innovation is obviously also happening in emerging markets. You were mentioning a few examples when we chatted earlier.
No, you're right, Silvia. And I think when we talked earlier, we talked about the two aspects of digitalization. One is obviously working with financial institutions to digitalize their lending operations to lower operating costs, and for them then with lower operating costs to go and increase their outreach. The second aspect is increasing the digital footprint of SMEs in emerging markets. SMEs today have access to far more consumers and opportunities to sell their products when they reach a digital e-commerce platform. And that then allows them to enhance their operations. But to get to that level of enhanced operational capacity, they need finance. So how do you marry the two? And fintech companies are able to create enough of a digital footprint or a transactional record to allow SMEs then to market that to lenders and say, look, I am bankable, even though if I don't have hard collateral, I have a transactional history which shows my cash flows. So IFC is working on both fronts, working with financial institutions to digitalize their operations, lower their operating costs, increase their outreach, working with fintechs to be able to cater to the services that the financial services that the SMEs need by really modifying the data that is out there. You know, it's about data manipulation. There are plenty of data points. But to be able to make sense of those data points, you need someone to be able to connect the dots. And fintechs, if they can actually create a credit profile of somebody by connecting some of those dots, makes that person a little bit more bankable. And I think that's the opportunities that we're really trying to help foster.
And finally, we also want to look at the future. So the panel discussion is titled Vision 2020. What do you view down the line?
Well, I think first of all, it's very opportune to have it today. This discussion, certainly from the EU perspective, is the moment where we are working on the next generation, and I would say the next 7 years in terms of EU programs that we will be rolling out. And so we are looking into what is needed in Europe. I mean, on the one hand, I would say one of the issues we have is that about 85% of the finance comes through bank lending, which is great. But we feel that the capital market-based instruments need to be further developed. And we are looking here at equity, but also at securitization, high quality ABS for SMEs. I think we also need to overcome and work towards that, the fragmentation. In Europe, you know, we have 28 member states, and we have as many capital markets as there are member states, and also the challenge is to find, therefore, support measures that can work throughout the 28 member states. And what we also need to do, I think there is again enough funding available, but the risk taking is a bit fragmented as well, because we have support at the EU level, we have support at the national level, at the regional level. And what we want to do is to combine these various resources and to go into the same direction. Of course, this needs to be done on a voluntary basis, and it means that we have to streamline the rules and make sure that all the various support measures are compatible. I think it's a big challenge, but I'm happy to see that the Commission has taken the lead here and in the reflection paper really aim at a single rule book, at impactful instruments, because that's also one of the challenges, I would say.
That's the path.
Yeah, this is really the path forward, I think.
That's great. Adel?
Within IFC, we're looking at how we can actually increase the size of the pie. And to do that, I think it's really focusing on the smaller entities. So the very small enterprises, bringing them into the financial sector, making them bankable. Medium-sized enterprises, I think, by and large, do today have greater access or greater opportunities towards access to finance in emerging markets. So that's, for them, it's products like what Roger mentioned, capital markets, trying to see whether there are opportunities in emerging market bond programs, looking at other institutional investors and retail investors coming in to complement what the banks have been able to do to date for those medium-sized enterprises. For the smaller sized enterprises, you have to still help them getting to that level where they start getting access to just rudimentary financial services. So for IFC, as we look at our strategy going forward, it's about creating markets, it's about broadening the level of services that are being offered today to SMEs, really catering towards increasing the number of people coming into the system. And I think our focus is really going to be on going to places where today the systems aren't really there, and working with the World Bank, our sister organization, in creating the right regulatory frameworks so that people that today are just outside of the financial sector have opportunities to get into it and really benefit from the growth that their economies are having.
So quite a lot of work ahead. The the micro, small and medium enterprises finance gap is estimated now to be $5.2 trillion, which is a massive figure. So, of course, the role that organizations such as the IEF and the IFC can play, I'm sure, will be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.